Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom podcast. This is a show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. And today I am joined by Mr. Steve Feldman. He is going to be joining us and talking a little bit about his backstory. He actually is a very knowledgeable about Japanese culture, and so he's going to be telling us about Japan and telling us a little bit about his story and interest in that. So, Steve, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
So, if you could just tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, my name is Steve. I'm known as Steve's POV, most commonly on YouTube and on other social media. But I'm 54 years old, and I grew up at a time. I grew up born in New York and grew up in New Jersey, and was not really into Japanese culture much in any way as a young person. I liked American cars. I liked American things. I really was not into Japanese culture very much growing up, certainly not influenced by anime or manga at the time or, any of those things. But I went to college at the University of Wisconsin in 1988. And at that time, Japan's economy was booming. And, Japan was coming to the United States, buying up places like Rockefeller Center, Japanese cars, Japanese culture, things, lifestyle items, the Walkman, things like that became commonplace in America. Japan's economy was booming, and I was a business major. I wanted to learn more about Japan. It was fascinating to me, and I decided to start studying business along with Japanese language as well, and combine the two for what really became my future after that. Pretty much everything going forward from there.
How did a guy who had zero interest in Japan growing up end up becoming a trusted voice there?
So maybe it was the eye opening I had. Maybe it was things that I realized. Honestly, when I got to college and we started taking things for some of the business school prerequisite classes were things like comparative politics. Well, that was one of them that I wound up choosing. And we're talking about 1988. This is back, we're about 30 some odd years after the end of World War II. Okay, a very rough time between Japan and America. And Japan, surrendered to the USA. Japan's economy, Japan was crushed after the war. In a short period of time, all of a sudden, Japan has come back to become, what they're saying was the number one economy in the world at that time was going to be Japan. And I started studying comparative politics in that class, the politics between, I think it was England and Japan and America and China, I believe. And the Japanese portion really interested me. And at the same time that I was studying that and learning about things about even feudal Japan and Japan being a closed nation with no trade with the world for hundreds of years before being opened up and being open to a lot of foreign ideas and then going and having the war that we had in World War II. But at the end of that, to rebuild, it was in the way the Japanese are, the way they work together, the way systems were developed over time in Japan, in a small country with very limited natural resources. They were able to use their work ethic and their ability to manufacture things and build things and high quality things and rebuild their economy so fast and then come and start selling all over the world and making Japan a high quality, famous brand name throughout the world. I thought that was fascinating and I wanted to learn more and things about the culture, the respect, the language as he started to learn about it, how levels of respect are built into the language and just in people's how you talk to your elders, how you talk to people you don't know, how their elderly are respected in the language. It's just so many different fascinating parts about how the Japanese did things, so different than the way we did things. And I'm not saying that one is better, one is worse, one is good as one is great. We are what we do as Americans. There's fantastic ways of way we do things too. But for somebody who has never saw things about Japan, that at that time I started looking at, and then getting to Japan for the first time, and then seeing. By the way, what I'm into very much is cars. I love cars. You could probably see the cars in my life. I grew up around cars. I grew up around American muscle cars, hot rods, chop tops, muscle cars, things like that. But when I got to Japan, I started seeing not only all these cultural things that we're talking about, but quite honestly, I started seeing Japanese cars that I'd never seen before, or Japanese cars that maybe I had seen before in the United States, never paid attention to, but the way they were stylized in Japan, the way they were lowered, the way bigger wheels were put on, the way Japanese guys would take their shoes off to get into their cars, like you would do when you're going into a house, something I'd never seen before. So I connected and opened my eyes to a lot of things that I hadn't seen culturally, car-wise, food-wise, on so many different fronts, and just continued to drive my passion for what, essentially I think I've become in many ways over the years is this kind of bridge between America and Japan, and respecting and, introducing and benefiting from both cultures.
What do most Americans misunderstand about Japan, and what do most Japanese misunderstand about America?
Well, what do we misunderstand about Japan? I think, it's easy to look at a society. Japan's, probably 99.9% Japanese. It's very, I think I mispronounce the word sometimes, but homogeneous, right? It's one culture. Everybody there is pretty much Japanese. Of course, you can dig back into history, there's Korean, Japanese, and there's a lot of mix of other things, but for the most part, it's a full Japanese country of Japanese people. So to go there, like when I got there in the early 90s, different than today, there wasn't that many foreigners in Japan. So you'd walk around and, as an American, you'd walk around as a white American, as somebody who looks very different than people in Japan. People were very interested and curious about, how I look. What does my skin feel like? Is it different? What does my hair feel like? Is it different? I always thought it was interesting and I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was fun. I was never insulted by it. But I think for some American people, and I've heard it before that, they feel that the Japanese are a very closed society. They're not open to other things. It's very homogeneous, however it's properly pronounced. It's a society that's not open to things, but that is really not the case in my feeling. I think if you go there and you put up a wall around yourself, you're not open to one adapting to their culture, to their way of being proud of your own culture and everything else, but going there and being open to theirs, you may have a hard time. You may feel that you are, discriminated against, or people there are not open to your differences. But that's not the case in Japan. They love cultures from all over. They love food from all over. You see, there's festivals and celebrations of things from all over. And while there's not that many foreigners, there is a lot more today. But the Japanese have always been open-minded, learning about my culture and the differences between me and them and other Americans and them and other cultures in them. And I find that really the truth about Japan, and maybe a misconception by Americans. For the Japanese, I think they, in some ways, I remember in the past, there were things that they would look at America, everybody's a cowboy, or, everybody's this cowboy image was something that was very popular years ago. I remember people used to say, I look like Mickey Rourke. And then as I got a little bit older, I started when I was younger, I looked like Michael J. Fox. And, and they've had these, images of America through lenses of maybe some TV shows that became popular and dubbed in Japanese there and everything else. But I just, I feel again that they've always been open to sharing and learning about our culture, about our differences, the things that I was interested in. They loved coming here and seeing how we lived, very, envious in many cases of our lifestyle, meaning big homes, large lots, big vehicles. That is, it's a very different way of thinking. I think, the American dream to many Japanese is something they looked at that they're very envious of, that there's the ability in America to build wealth, to buy a big house, to have lots of things that in Japan, a country that's very small and limited, it's not as easy to do. I think it's something they look and they admire of our culture very much.
What are some surprising differences between doing business in Japan versus the US?
There's a lot of differences. There's a huge amount of difference. First of all, there's a total level within the language and within body language and with just in greetings and dealing with people that are so different. One, and on my YouTube channel, I used to do series of videos about these, the comparisons between Japanese salarymen and American salesmen. One of the things is again, you're always dressed in a suit in Japan. You're always in a suit. It doesn't matter if it's 120 degrees outside, your presentation is super important. You're always carrying a briefcase, and you go to meetings, you always have business cards. Okay, here in America, some people have business cards, but you never know where your business cards are. Japanese have business cards in a holder, and there's a whole presentation of how your card is presented. You put it there. Somebody doesn't just grab your card in Japan. By the way, when you hand it to them, you hand it to them with two hands. You hand it to them facing to them so that they can read what you're handing to them. It's not a, hey, bro, here's my card and throw it out. Meaning there's a whole custom behind it. You receive that card and you just don't stuff it in your pocket. You look at it, you read it, you remember the guy's name, his position, his rank. And there's usually when you go to meetings with Japanese guys, there's not just one guy. You can bet that there's going to be three, four, five, six different people there in a big meeting room. And a girl's going to bring in tea or coffee or cold drinks and water or whatever. This it's very formal, unlike us. Japanese have very formal ways of doing things, and meetings in Japan is certainly one of them. By the way, you got that business card. Now they tell you to sit down. You sit down, right? You may have six Japanese guys sitting in front of you there. Those cards now don't get tucked away. They're put, if you knew that that was sitting there and sitting here and this guy sitting here, and that this guy's rank is higher than the other guys because he's the CEO or the president, and these guys are just kind of his sub guys. You arrange your cards once so you know who's sitting where, or by rank, who the key guy is too, by having his cards certainly above the other guys' things. There's a whole way of thinking now in the language when you're talking to people. There's lots of ways the language is built around this societal structure of things. When you're talking to the president of a company, the language I would use would be not only honoring him in a very formal type and polite type of language, but there would also be involved humbling myself. This is a really hard thing to understand. As Americans, we're not. I'm not saying we're all not humble people, but to humble ourselves in the language, meaning that when I mean something like this, I will allow you, thank you for allowing me to speak to you about this topic. You understand what it is? Because I've lowered myself to him. He's allowing me to speak. Kind of a weird way of thinking, but this is, again, it's a polite way of how you word and structure things and how you speak to people. You put them on a pedestal. In many cases, you lower yourself down. This is politeness in Japanese. Now, people around you work for you. There's certainly language that's much, much different and may sound harsh in some ways how you speak to people, but it's a very, structured society. Certainly the language and how the society has been built, how companies are built there in position. So that's one big difference. You're definitely going to go eat dinner with Japanese, and you're probably going to go drinking with Japanese people in business scenarios as well. And that's a lot of fun and everything else. But there's whole other things when you sit at dinner, you sit down, they put you to dinner. We don't think about it. We go start grabbing food as it comes out, nothing. Japan, you don't touch your food. You don't do a darn thing until whoever is organized the dinner. Traditionally, in most cases, going to be the president of the other company or the owner of the other company who's invited you to dinner. And until he says, let's eat. And you always start with a kanpai, which is cheers, with a beer or with typically beer, a drink and sit down. But you don't start eating. You won't do anything until the big guy makes his move and does things. So there's many, many, many differences in how things are done. How you hang up the phone in Japan when you're done with a conversation with somebody. Believe it or not, there's a way to properly hang up a phone. The way you don't hang up a phone, I learned this lesson in Japan a long time ago, was we used to deal with a big media company and the guy would call and I would talk to him and I would, you say goodbye and you hang up the phone. Well, he called back once in like 2 seconds. My phone rang again. I picked up the phone. He says, don't ever hang up the phone like that on me again or any other Japanese person. I didn't know what he meant. Then I found out. When you say goodbye, okay, the polite thing to do is to wait till the other person is cut off the phone before you cut off the phone, especially if you're somebody younger, subordinate to that person. The polite thing to do. So you'll see a lot of Japanese guys say, bye, hi, arigato gozaimasu, thank you, whatever in Japanese, right? And you're waiting, you're waiting. You see the guy won't cut off the phone. He's waiting for the other guy to cut off the phone first. Some cases you get both guys waiting to cut off the phone, and it's 2, 3, 4 seconds sometimes before it's off. But it's not like, okay, I'm done talking with you. Adios, thanks. I'm on to my next thing. That would be projected through slamming a phone down on somebody like that. A lot of little differences that make doing business there very different than the way we think.
It's really sophisticated, a majority of that stuff you don't see here. And that was one thing I did not know, that
Yeah.
I think it's more mature and more formal than some businesses are here. I had no idea that that happened. You lost me when you had to do like suit in 120. I was like, "Ooh, you lost me there." But in a
Yeah.
briefcase too, I've never been to a job where I've seen people carry a briefcase. Here people would be like, "You're going way over to the top for it. That's a little overboard. You're a little too overdressed to just go to a McDonald's." Like, it's like you're a little too dressed up for that.
Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. Um, what inspired you to open a Japanese cafe in Texas, and what lessons from Japan influenced you how to run it?
Well, I've never been in the restaurant business ever, and I've never done anything. But when I moved to Texas from California, from Los Angeles about 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, and I was doing my YouTube channel, continuing doing that and everything else. And I got to Texas, and what I noticed was that while uh, there is some Japanese people here, and there's a Japanese supermarket, and there's some other things. There's certainly not a community like there was in Los Angeles to the size and scope of Japanese influence that there was there. It's kind of new and fresh here, and I started doing videos on my channel at the time with where I would some of the new friends that I made from Texas. Who had never been exposed to some of these Japanese foods. I started doing videos where I would invite them to a home party, or we would meet out somewhere and I would feed them Japanese foods that they never had before. And everybody had great reactions. They were great videos, viewed hundreds of thousands, some of them millions of times, and terrific. And I started thinking in my head, one thing about my YouTube is great. It's fun. It's a nice project. It's brought all these aspects of Japan that I love together, and I have a nice Japanese audience. But something I always thought about doing and thought would be interesting was bringing some of the foods and other things that I like and introducing them to Texas people, but not just third parties, other people's stuff, but maybe creating something of my own where I can take now all of my passions and bring them into one place together. So customizing cars is something I've always loved. Again, I talk to you about car culture. Okay, I like Japanese street foods. Everybody talks about sushi. When you say Japanese food, for sushi, 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 right? That's certainly one Japanese food. But there's a whole level of Japanese food that car guys and just regular people like, and it's Japanese street foods, festival foods, things like that. And there's just not a lot of that in existence, certainly not here in Texas, but in the United States overall. I'm talking about things like onigiri, talking about things which are rice balls, talking about things like obayaki, which are round Japanese sweet cakes and other things like that. And these are easily customizable, meaning for me, this guy who has taken Japan and America, and now Texas and Japan, and kind of meshed them all together, I started making Texas size Japanese rice balls, bigger than Japanese size, but filled with Japanese rice, Japanese authentic seaweed, and all these delicious things about Japanese food that are so good and so nice that I can introduce to Texas people who've never had them before, have heard about them, want to try them before. And if I open a cafe and I have a big parking lot where we could do nice car events and bring people who love Japanese cars in, and invite people who like Japanese culture in, or people who like my channel because those are things that I do, and now enjoy good Japanese foods, street foods, takoyaki, yakisoba, omayaki, mangawayaki, onigiri, drinks, Japanese coffee, and all these other things together in an environment where everybody is just respectful of each other's cultures and differences, but has this link to Japan in some way through one of these avenues. This was a dream of mine to do, and we just turned 1 year old. And thankfully, it's so far it's growing every month, and more people are coming and really enjoying something that we're offering and to people. And it's become something really fun, something new, but and a challenge in many ways. And by the way, too, one other thing that I implemented here that I think's noteworthy is in my cafe. Tipping culture, okay, is something else just real quick let me touch on, okay? In Japan, you don't tip. There's no tipping in Japan for anything. Tipping is not part of the culture there. Yet, despite not having to tip for anything, the service is top notch, top tiered. All the language things I talked about before, you will never have somebody mouthing off to a customer. You will never have somebody being disrespectful to a customer. The customer is king. It is treated that way, and employees work for the customers with no expectation of anything above and beyond being a person of that company receiving a salary for what they do. That is it. And it is exceptional service on all levels in Japan. Here, on the other hand, we have various grades of service. And in many cases, unfortunately, it's not very good. People are rude, people are disrespectful. And nowadays, certainly since Corona and those times, the tipping, much longer, way before even the coronavirus, but way before that, tipping was something that in our culture, as an old guy, I could tell you, you're a much younger guy than I am, but I'll tell you, there was specific times and places to tip and reasons to tip. Someone in a restaurant, a waitress, working her butt off, serving that she was making $2 and some odd cents on an hour for it. A tip was common. A taxi driver, a barber, and other things. But tipping culture has gotten out of control in America. Now you get on a fast food line or in a cafe, and the first thing they do is stick that screen in your face to either one, guilt you into paying more, maybe scare you into pay not giving a tip. There's no the tip just has become something that is just has to be there, right? In my cafe, and it was challenging because again, I have American employees, I have some Japanese, but I have people living in Texas, used to getting tips. And I said, no
Right.
tips in the cafe, no tips, and we don't stick a tip screen in your face. And in many cases, people are like, listen, how come you're not asking for tips? And I said, I wanted a Japanese environment cafe. I didn't want people to think that we're not gonna sit at the register like this, guilting you into tipping for something. Things are expensive already. Prices for everything are up. Things are tough for
Hmm.
everybody. We're making a premium product and everything else, but I want to give an experience and I want to prove one other thing too, that young American people who I've employed, people coming out of high school, people in college, a diverse group of kids. Nobody necessarily speaks Japanese. I have a couple of Japanese people too, but that people can provide a Japanese level customer service experience, greeting people, treating people nicely, feeding them delicious food without the expectation of getting tips. And in some ways, not expecting a tip actually has many customers saying, I'd like to give a tip to your people for that. And in which case we gladly, humbly accept it. And it is given to the staff who have created that experience for them. So a whole different way of thinking as well in the cafe.
Tipping is such a huge thing that Americans do. And, some places go a little overboard. I agree. Growing up in the 2000s, it was normal down here, which other parts it might be different, but just growing up in Alabama, that's just what you did. And then sometimes you didn't even leave a tip. You kind of tipped based on how well the server was. If they did an outstanding job, then you would give them more of a tip.
Right,
And a lot of people in some different parts of the world and here probably go by the percent system. You're supposed to give 10% of what your total is. You're supposed to give 15%. Here, it's more based of how well they do. If they do an outstanding job, you give them a good, decent tip. If
right,
they do mediocre to a little less than that, you might give them a small tip. And then if they're just plain right awful at what they do, they don't get a tip at all. So
right.
it's more service wise than it is on rations. But I was just thinking, a lot of these older people that get annoyed at tips, they're like, "I'm moving to Japan." I was like, "I'm moving to Japan. I don't have to tell. I'm going there."
That that is right, and you can always expect good friendly service there for all, in almost every case. People are very polite on all levels of food, from fast food to any type of service you get there. But I think we can do that too. And I'm not saying I don't want to deprive young people of getting tips. It's not my goal. I want to pay
Right.
people fairly, and we try to take care of people in other ways too. And that, but. I also think that tipping culture has gotten a little out of control as well. And so anyway, I wanted a Japanese environment. Japan doesn't tip. That's the environment I've done, and for a year we've been doing it, and I think people understand it and are thankful for it.
What's the key to building trust with an audience in a completely different culture and language?
Being real, not being fake, being honest, not trying to copy other people. Don't copy some other people, you're going to start a YouTube channel, you want to deal with another culture, be honest, be proud of who you are too, don't try to be somebody you're not. I really think that's something big. Many people watch or influenced by other people and maybe try to pretend to be that person or whatnot. I don't think that gets you very, very far. Be open-minded to things, to learning things, not closed-minded. Look at other ways to maybe do things that you learn. People, when you're building trust with another, you want to take what they say back to you and think about some of those things and maybe adjust to some things, or maybe say, you know what, those are some ideas, some things I've never really thought of before that, culturally the Japanese think that way, and I've never really thought that way, but that's quite interesting. And then what I like to do then ultimately is to take some of the best of what we were raised and born, and some of the cultural traits that we have, and take some of those cultural traits that Japan has that are fantastic things that we don't have, and kind of mesh them kind of together in the one. And it's a new way of thinking. It's an interesting way of dealing with people. It's maybe a bit different, but I think becomes a very good basis for doing business here in a moral and ethical and friendly and nice way, maybe a refreshing way for some people too. I try to treat many people here that I meet the same way that even though we're not speaking Japanese, but with that same respect idea and that same thought process. And I don't just throw people business cards here either. They get thrown at me, but I give them to them in a nice way, and I take time to read their card because I think that does seem like the right thing to do. We don't do it. I'm not saying it's wrong, but a guy gives you a card. I mean, you should read it. Somebody gives you something. They give you a birthday card. We open it up and read it.
Right.
The
Hmm.
business cards. Anyway, what I just think is there's really great aspects of what I really enjoy is taking some of the things. I talk a lot. Yeah, I'm a talker. I could talk for hours nonstop. Japanese people are very good at being silent and not talking. And let me tell you something, okay? Here's something perhaps you yourself will learn too. I made this rule, right? This is something I made after being in Japan, but a rule or just something I've realized. God gave us two ears and one mouth for, I think, a very specific reason. You figure it out? Listen twice as much, talk half as much. And basically, if you talk, 100, you better be listening for 200. What I'm saying is you got two ears because you should be listening double, at least what you're not, than what you're talking. And sometimes, if you notice in a negotiation too, and other things too, Japanese are very good at just doing a tooth suck and just going quiet. Have you ever sat with somebody who just sits there now and does it? And do you ever feel uncomfortable? You do. I can tell you, Americans get really uncomfortable when that happens, right? And he didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. Just shut his mouth. And you'd be surprised by just sometimes shutting our mouths, how much you yield from just being quiet and letting somebody else just keep going and going and going and going because they can't stop talking. And it's a very hard thing to do, especially for somebody like me too. But just sometimes just stop and listen double what you speak. And I think that's a really good and a hard lesson to learn. But I think it's an effective negotiating tool too, by the way. Just shutting your mouth sometimes because people just keep going. You don't even ask them, and you're like, oh, okay, I didn't need to know that, but um, great. Now that I know it, again, in negotiations or other things, you earn. I mean, you gain strength or knowledge through something that you didn't expect to even get by just shutting up sometimes.
For people that want to check you out, and learn more about what you do, where can they all find you and what's some of your social media platforms?
Well, YouTube is my number one platform and approaching 800,000 subs on Steve's POV on YouTube. You could search that way. My videos, I speak Japanese in most of the videos, but every video has CC, closed caption in English as well. So you could certainly follow along on all the videos. On Instagram as well, I'll be Steve's POV. And I would like to just mention, please, at the end, I own a cafe in Plano, Texas. So for those of you who are into Japanese culture, who love Japanese food, who would like an authentic experience and a nice time, my cafe is called Hoshi Japanese Cafe. That is Hoshi, and that means star in Japanese. It came from my love for the star shape itself, but for star and Lone Star State. So there was a combination there. It became Hoshi. So Hoshi Japanese Cafe. And finally, I am a realtor as well for people who watch my channel and other things who are moving to Texas. I do help people. I don't knock on doors. I don't cold call people, but people who watch me, listen to my YouTube or listen to podcasts like this who want somebody who's no BS, and will work for you to help you as a realtor here in the state of Texas. I am here to do that, and I'm located north of Dallas. And I thank you very, very much. It was very nice to speak with you today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And as I always say for my listeners, I will put off his links in the description so that you can come back and look at it at a later time if you decide to come back. I'll also put your cafe information down there for anyone that might be in the area and want to check it out. I will definitely put that in there. Again, thank you for wanting to come on today. I learned some stuff. Hope my listeners learned some stuff too. One last question, if for like real quick. What's if people want to go to Japan, what would be the number one place for them to go?
Well, I mean, I guess the best thing, especially if you're on a budget, I mean, going to Tokyo obviously would be a good base to be at in Japan for an initial trip. But explore outside of Tokyo. I mean, I guess it really depends on what you have. If you have a little more time, you go Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka as well. But if you have just one place that you could choose, you kind of have maybe a limited budget, maybe you don't have a lot of time to be there, go to Tokyo. stay in Tokyo, explore the big city, but get out of the city a little bit too and explore some of the surrounding areas, some of the countryside. Go to Mount Fuji, go for a hike, go for a climb, go to a hot springs, go sit in a Japanese bath and soak and feel refreshed and eat really good food. But most important thing, just be open-minded. Remember, you're a guest in their country and you want to be respectful of their different traditions. You're going to see many things that are different than what we are used to or what we do. It's not right or wrong. It's just how it's done. It's different and it's interesting, and open your mind up and let it all soak in and enjoy. Few people will come back not liking Japan. I think most people go there and say, let's plan our second trip, our third trip, our fourth trip. That does seem to be a common theme. So that's my advice.
Well, I've always wanted to go to Japan. It's been one of the number one places to go. Um, but of course, I don't know any of the language, so the whole time I'd be there, I'd be like, Google Translate on my phone, be like, hello, hello, hello. Just like having it just face out, looking everywhere. Well, thank
You're
you
a
so
nice
much.
guy. You're an open mind. I could tell from your questions and how you respond to them to my answers that you're an open minded. You would have no problem despite not speaking the language. You will be just fine. If you're polite and courteous and you speak slowly, Japanese will go out of their way, even if they don't speak English very well, to help you or to do what they can to make you comfortable and happy and to leave Japan with a smile on your face. That much you can expect.
Well, hopefully my listeners have learned some stuff today. As always, as he said, don't feel ashamed that you don't know any of the culture. As long as you go there and you're respectful and willing to learn, they will work with you and they'll be understanding. Um,
100%.
Steve, thank you so much for being on today and um, keep doing what you're doing. I think what you're doing is great. Learning and teaching people about it is really, really awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I wish you lots of luck with your podcast going forward. You're a very nice guy, and I hope you get millions and millions of downloads going forward.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I just wanted to again thank Steve so much for appearing on my show today and telling me a little bit more about the Japanese culture. I definitely learned some stuff, and I hope you did as well. If you would like to stay tuned and keep more and be updated for more episodes, make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also follow me on social media. Instagram and TikTok is Lethal Venom Podcast. YouTube and Facebook, it is Noah's Podcast. And if you have anything that you would like to email me about, inquiries, tech errors, or anything similar, just make sure to email me at lethalvenompod@gmail.com. As I said, I will put all of Steve's information down in the description box below so you can go check him out and learn more about his restaurant that he has and his cafe. I really do appreciate you guys all so much for listening to the podcast. I do have one thing that I want to say, but it's not going to be said from me. I'd like to thank Japan for for a quick second. When I was looking at my analytics the other day, I noticed that there was what do you call wow, here's just how stupid I am. A territory over in Japan, I think it was near, I looked at the map, Nagoya, I think is the name of it. In the Aichi prefecture, is that how you say it? Again, American. The Aichi place has actually had some listeners there. I don't quite know how you are listening to me, but I wanted to say thank you, Japan, for listening to the podcast. So, through the help of Google Translate, yes, because I'm dumb, I have wrote out a message that I would like for Google Translate to describe for my Japan listeners and just give them a thank you message. So to people listening that don't speak Japanese, just hold on just 1 second. It's like a quick message, and then I'll say my thank you and other stuff at the end.
日本の視聴者の皆さん、リーサルベノムをお聞きいただきありがとうございました。まさか日本の皆さんが私のポッドキャストを聞いてくれるとは思いもしませんでした。本当に感謝しています。いつか日本を訪れたいと思っています。皆さんを愛しています。そして改めて感謝します。次回のリーサルベノムのエピソードでお会いしましょう。
All right, I don't know if that's gonna work, but that was just my message to them. If you want to find my other podcast, Music Talks and Southern Reads, they're both on wherever you get your podcasts from, as well as Lethal Venom. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Pandora, YouTube, and other platforms as well. Again, thank you so much for listening. Hope you all have a great day and a great week this week. And I will catch you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.